Hey Carmichael, how's it going?
It's going all right, man. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Give me a second, I gotta grab my charger.
No rush.
So, how's your projects going? How's your project going in general?
Not really. Unfortunately,
Do you
it's
feel
been
like
rough.
you do you feel like you've kind of lost your taste for it, or you're out of sync with it, and that time is kind of just getting away from you? Do you feel like kind of demoralized with it?
Yeah, I mean, kind of all of it. I just I don't know. It's been weird lately.
I think you're so good. I thought that comic was very legit. And I
Thanks,
know
man.
that you had, yeah, I know you had like less positive things to say about it. I thought it was really strong.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, I definitely think you should do another page of it. I think you could do that in lieu, substitute that for some of these standalone assignments that you've been doing for my class, or weave them together.
Okay.
Even if you're just, if you don't know what the next beats are of the story, you could just do some, some images that take place in that world, like uh book plates, chapter pages, or kind of like a perspective cover.
Okay. Yeah, I thought about just doing some studies for Gilbert because I mean I've never really looked at his art that much. Um, but I don't know, this stuff's pretty incredible. Um,
Yeah.
what are the, I'm trying to figure out where my camera is. There's that the way he drew some of those rain sequences where it's just like those streaks of brush. It's like nuts to me. It's so simple and obvious, but it works so well.
Me too. I've been I've been trying to think like him this week, and I'm like, where these techniques been my whole life? I was trying to
Yeah.
draw some really complex shapes. I had to draw like a food buffet this week, and
Oh,
I was like, I'm gonna draw these plates of scrambled eggs the way he did bushes. So it
Okay.
doesn't make any sense, but it does make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. There's the frame of I think they're in a junkyard,
Yeah.
and all the junk is just splotches of black, and it looks like it's so simple, but it works perfectly. It's great. Like your eye reads it.
yeah, he's such a perfectionist though, isn't he? I can never, like all his lines are even if they're messy, they're perfection.
It's totally true. That's a common thing that I find in all the really masterful cartoonists. Part of me feels like they're from an alien, another planet, because of
Mhm.
that level. Yeah, they think like us. They're like, they think like me. Like they feel like they're just, weirdos, not necessarily somebody who's kind of disappeared behind a wall of professionalism, but at the same time, they're such pros.
Mhm.
I was talking when I went to Carol Tyler's farm, we were talking about the history of comics, and her husband was Justin Green. And she said that she feels like Justin Green and Crumb stand out, like they have more of a legacy amongst all the other underground cartoonists because they drew like pros. They had that like level of expertise to them.
Justin Green, does he have an E on the end? I looked him up.
Yeah, it's I think it might be Gren. I think it's just Green, not with an extra E. But if you
Okay.
look him up, a Binky Brown, his stuff will come up. So one sec, I'm missing one thing. I'll be right back, everybody. Oh, I know where it is. Sorry about that. The thing I was looking for was right behind me.
It's usually the case. Are you back home now?
No, I'm still in Kentucky.
You guys have crazy
I'll be here
weather?
next week as well, and then I'll be home on the 26th.
Okay.
Give me 1 sec. Okay, Zoom.
Is she ever gonna move to New York?
The best compromise I think we could come up with is that maybe we can move to Jersey, because we
Oh.
need a house because of our dogs.
Oh, right. Oh,
And
Good.
I can't really leave because I have my medical coverage. So I don't know,
yeah.
we might just keep on doing a long distance thing for as long as we can. Okay, so we're gonna start off, we're gonna look at Gilbert again and talk about some stuff that we didn't emphasize last week, and review some stuff that we did. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about some of the basics. We usually talk about, strategies for moving around using real perspective. And I want to give a little bit of a review of that. 1 second. And then I want to talk about some of the more traditional methods of using perspective. As boring as it is, I think it's just as fun in another way as it is to use the kind of made up perspectives. So I do find that you see a lot more shortcuts or twisted versions of using perspective when you look at a lot of good art. This one here, I have a lot of students who will tell me, I don't really, I don't see it. I don't have it in my head. I don't feel like I'm capable of balancing all the elements that go into making something recede into space. And I want to go over the basic fundamentals of that again. What I'm doing right now looks pretty correct, and I'm just using a very loose approximator of what would happen if a fence was going back in space. There's two things I'm doing. One is that, see, Crumb didn't use the math to figure out these boards here. They're getting bigger as they go towards us, but not that much bigger. They are just getting, if this is, let's say this one is A and this one is B, then C has to be wider than B, D has to be wider than C, E has to be wider than D, et cetera, et cetera. So look at them. If this one is, let me make this bigger so you can see what I'm saying. If this is G, look how much wider H is, just a hair's width wider. And I is just a hair bit wider. And he kind of blows it here. I think actually I is, what comes after Y? L? Wait, A, B, C, D, G, H, I, J. I have a weird blank spot for the first letter of my name. J. And then he gets a little bit wonky here, but you kind of sells it that since it's such a badly made ramshackle fence, that that's a strength that works as well. But the majority, and he blows it here as well, actually. So that kind of blows my theory out of the water. Though I'd say 80% of these are, let's make each one just a little bit wider than the one before it. The other thing he has going for him is you can see that the ground is going up here, and then it levels down just a little bit. So it's basically a hill. So if you have this and it's a perfect straight line or like this, that means your math has to be a little bit more exacting. If there's a box which is on this track, I'm going to guesstimate again. You gotta have it be, if it's not perfect, it's a little bit more screwed up looking, like this nice, let's say this is a refrigerator here that somebody dragged out to the sidewalk. And I'm just guesstimating. I didn't figure out my vanishing points, and it looks roughly okay. I'm going to straighten that out a little bit, but it looks roughly okay. But this one, see how good that looks? It just belongs in this world because the ground is just a little bit lumpy.
Mhm. Well, it kind of seems like as you get toward the right, the fence and like the things that he's sitting on are like almost cheating out a little bit. So it's kind of more like a stage set than a real environment. And then that way you can kind of see the character better.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, another question I think people have at the beginning is they really get thrown about how fat things should be get. I was like this. If we could see this whole box, a lot of people are like, I can't figure out whether this box should be like this, which is the way I would imagine it. Just kind of nice. It's getting a little bit bigger here, just a little bit. This side is wider than this side. But I remember in the beginning, I would be like, should it be like this? You know, and I wouldn't have a system for figuring it out. And if he was sitting on the shape I just drew, it would look very weird, but not necessarily the worst thing. Maybe he's sitting on a, what would you call the shape in geometric terms? A rhombus or something? Maybe from the front, it looks like this. And that's a fun shape. So when I started learning perspective, I started thinking, oh yeah, it's cool. What if somebody has a desk which is shaped like this, like a weird arty-farty desk? And then when it's at an angle, the angles it doesn't make any difference. It can just have a very jazzy kind of energy to it. And when I did that, I couldn't pull it off, to be honest, but I tried. I remember that was one of the first things I did when learning perspective, and it was partially a way to kind of get away from, so let's say he's in a world where this doesn't quite match up with the wall behind it. That could be kind of fun in the right hands. But that's why I went for first, because I wanted an escape from the tyranny of real perspective. This just looks randomly in this, like it's placed in this environment, which is following different perspective laws. So recently, I went over some of the basics of perspective. And would it be okay if I went over those again, or are those going to be boring for everybody?
It's okay for me.
What about
Do
the
you-
rest of you?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool.
I always like perspective stuff. So
Did you send us a PDF?
No, I can do it right now,
Oh,
though. My new system is, let me do this real quick. No, I just sent you the Gilbert perspective. Let me go share. And then I got to turn this off, restricted. Anyone with the link, copy link, and the link is going to be in chat.
Are you sharing like the slides you're showing now or a different deck?
I'm sharing the ones that, if you look in the chat, the one I'm sharing right now.
Oh, okay.
how do I do that? I don't know how.
Do you see the chat window come
Yeah,
up? I'll write
uh-huh.
hi. Oh, cool. Just click on it or copy paste it. And if not, I can send it as an email.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Awesome. So this has a bunch of different systems in it. I wrote this one up a long time ago. I'm also going to show my social reels on PDF. Love this image. So this is classic overhead perspective. I call this isometric perspective. We were, Adam, you were in class the other night and you saw, I was talking about this with Helen, how in this world, unlike the fence we just saw, which is receding, these walls are, and the lines are, the wall and the ceiling are eventually going to taper towards each other and touch. And like in her world, this table would eventually, if it was the length of a football field, eventually the top and the bottom of it would touch. That's never going to happen in this world. This table isn't slightly angled. That's all it would take for this to be real perspective, or is for this end to be just tilted that much, and that one is as well. And then eventually these 2 points would go in. What you'll find is that when you look at people who do overhead perspective, like I think Juiced Schwartz is later on in this PDF. There he is. This is idealized perspective. This one on the right is not. Look at it very carefully, and you can see these angles are just slightly tapering. This line is taller than that line by just a fraction. So what you see is that these lines are actually following quote unquote real perspective, which is, it's close enough to this, but eventually if this piece of paper was 80 times longer than it is, you would see maybe it's just on a 24-inch sheet of paper, you'd eventually see these lines narrow so much they pinch together. Unlike this, where the lines will never converge. So that's another great abstraction we can use. This one too, this is real perspective. As much as it looks weird, glance at it and you realize this is just as traditional as what you would find in a Thomas Hart Benton painting. The line of the ground there presumably is there. I can't quite see it. And this line as well, it's kind of correct. Either that or my math is a little bit off, or I have the angle slightly off here. And down here, I'm going to use a different color. This painting is also angling towards a horizon line. I can't quite tell if this is real or not. It looks real to me. I can't tell if it's because I'm using this wonky tool or whatever. But I mean, everything in this world is roughly an estimate of real perspective. Whereas he could have shown this same scene here. Where it would just be a tiny shift. If I was going to do this with quote unquote iconic perspective, I think it would, this line, this line, this line, this line would match up perfectly, and the ceiling would match up. It's just an increment difference. Or if I showed it from a top angle, it would be like this. And you get this nice, chewy, easy to digest depiction of a couch in space. And if I want to be really anal about it, that's incorrect. That line and this line have to line up. It's just a bit off. So you got to be a complete hyper. You have to be really ever vigilant that your lines are really lining up. That also is not perfect. This and this have to be exactly the same angle. And then I get that nice little fake perspective. And then the back of the couch lines up to the back of the room. So the disadvantage is that you sometimes can't fit as much into a small area. I always say that if you're using idealized perspective and you have two people meeting in a corner, they're gonna have to be really small if you want to show them 5 feet away, or God forbid, 10 feet away. Whereas if I did a more kind of conventional perspective, I could have a tiny frame and have my one figure be big and the other one be small. So that's an advantage of mastering real perspective, is that you aren't always a slave to those weird rules, as if you're looking down into I had a hermit crabs when I was a kid. It reminds me of the looking into a small aquarium that a hermit crab would live in, or an ant farm. There it is again, right there. And then this is the other thing. Look at this crumb image, frame 1. There's no perspective. It's very real because him and Eileen draw so beautifully. But everything is flat from a front view, like Snoopy's doghouse. This is another thing I talk about every week. When in doubt, especially in a small frame, put this weird black here. That's probably some kind of shadow from something that's cast from above. And they do it beautifully, and it just creates even more depth to the image, makes it feel a little bit more jazzy and well designed. So out of these 3 frames, there's no perspective. By which I mean, I always talk about Snoopy's doghouse. Snoopy's doghouse from the front really looks like a poster or a paper cutout that symbolizes the doghouse. Even as a kid, I feel like you read this and you feel like something is weird. You know it stands for this kind of house, but he's not really bending over backwards to show you the dimensionality of it. It looks very flat. So Charlie Brown comes out to feed Snoopy the food, and Snoopy's like some weird flat symbol of a dog, and the ground doesn't do you any. It's very minimal. It's easy. I was reading Ben Mara had a blog today where he was quoting David Lynch about talking about the role of simplicity in his work as he gets older, and Mara was saying that his new work is very simple. And he's used to have a lot of bells and whistles, and now he feels like the writing is more important, and he can get more writing done more quickly if he goes for a simpler approach. And Schultz is probably the same way. Crumb could never stop showing off, really. This is an amazing, everything here is rendered like an old master. And so he has the flat, straight on views of the environment. And then when he's not doing that, he does this kind of arc of blackness, which Gilbert also does. Here, she's glowing with energy. You were a crazy girl. I even had 2 husbands. Yeah, you did. I was one of them. So was that fun? Did he give you a feeling of, and she's like glowing, just as if this was a Marvel comic, this would be the moment that maybe somebody is getting zapped with, somebody's getting charged with energy or drama. And they're doing it here for a different type of drama because it works. It's a really dramatic view. Now, finally here, we're getting real perspective. This is tricky. You can tell by the angle of this, and even somehow I could tell here that's angled up. These are angling. This is angled. It's actually real perspective, and it's the only frame that shows it shows that real traditional perspective of the 5 frames we've looked at. So there's a lot of cheats. The first one we looked at was the idea that you can have the ground be wobbly or uneven, even on an interior shot. If I have somebody who's like, I'm the art dealer, I came to look at your paintings, put them on this landing up here. And if you don't see where that landing begins and ends, then it just kind of, you sell it. It's like an architectural detail that creates multi-levels. And as soon as this level doesn't correspond with the one down here, I could have this be anything I wanted. This room could be round like that. And there's the art dealer. I mean, here's the artist. Welcome to my gallery. Welcome to my studio. This one could be doing anything I want. It could be following 2-point perspective, 1-point perspective, or idealized perspective. This looks good, right? And it's not the type of math-oriented estimations that we're normally making. It's complete nonsense. I could do it like that. It doesn't matter, but because you don't see where this platform is, we basically buy it. Your logical brain doesn't say, wait a minute, how does this work? You could even have if this is windows instead of art, and there's buildings back here that are doing yet another perspective. It's like theater, or somebody building a stage. You really have a lot of leeway that we don't think about. And I kind of developed that method from thinking about my sand dune method, where I discovered that if you look at sand dunes, like you would see in an old Roadrunner Coyote cartoon, I always thought to myself, okay, so here's the freeway, here's the sun, and in the Roadrunner Coyote, they would do this. Road, then the road continues up here. Just like with that fence, has to get a little bit bigger. This is A, and this is B. Then B has to be bigger than A. If there's another one back here, just make it smaller than the first one. And I start to get right, that looks really good. So I started to apply, I'll do one more here, except I'm almost out of room, and one more here. So in the cartoons, you would see the Roadrunner would zip across all these and leave a stream until he ends up here going beep, 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 and it would always work. And I started to realize it's the same thing as what I just showed you. These are all different landings, and they're all following their own perspective. If I wanted to break it down and graph out each one, I could, or even do a BS version of it like I am now, where they starts to look like an old-fashioned atlas or a series of globes. So these are all systems that work. More real perspective. It looks like idealized perspective, but do you all see how this and this are not lining up with this? So my system for figuring out perspective, even these, if you look carefully, look at the angles of these lines. See that one? If this is higher, and at this rate of every drawer being not only higher, but leveled up, where the arrows are starting to level out here, it's probably going to be straight. It goes from being a line which is going down towards, here's 3 o'clock, here's 6 o'clock. It's like at 4:15. And then here it's at 3:15, and then finally it's at 3 o'clock. And eventually it's going to be at 2 o'clock. And then at 1 o'clock. Another one, this is real perspective. You've got that is at 3:30. That's at 3 o'clock. That's at 2:45. That's at 2:15. And that's as high up as we go. If it kept on going, you'd have something that was at probably about up here. Maybe it would start to be at 1 o'clock. So it happens slowly. And it means that if this is A and this is B and this is C, all of those not only have to be higher, but leveled up more. B has to be tilted more than A. C has to be tilted more than B, but not as much as D, which is just a hair's width angled more than C. And if you look at it, I'm not sure if it's perfect. It's close, but I don't know. I don't know if these are perfect. It looks really good though. Is this all making sense, what I'm saying about A, B, C, and D, and one of the arms of a clock? Then you get to Kirby, and he's like Crumb, another master who doesn't use, sorry, my arm is tensing, my weird forearm is doing weird stuff. Kirby here, he's completely making up the perspective in that large frame on the right. Completely. And if you look at it carefully, the dog's feet don't make any sense. Because at this rate, I've actually broken this down before. At this rate, if that's the angle, let me do the math. Yeah, why are his feet so close to each other? Maybe he's tensed in a weird way here. But if I do this, it feels so much better. That's where his other foot needs to be at this angle. If we do the math, like the width of these blocks seem to be, how much would a human stance be? If I spread my legs across 2.5 feet. So 2.5 feet, the gap between here, I'd have to figure it out in a logical way. I'm starting to lose it, but I know that it doesn't seem correct to me that everybody's feet are staggered down at a certain degree. The degree, that's it. Yeah. The degree would be even further here. And if anything, the dog's feet are even more of a span than the figures above. So this is one block and the blocks are the same length. That's it. This is probably 2.5 feet, which means that if he had that same kind of conservative stance that she has, that foot would be here based on what these blocks are telling me. And it looks better. So, and it doesn't matter. It's like Hitchcock says, he didn't care if his movies fell apart on further analysis. He cared that you believed it at the moment that they were unfolding in front of you in the theater. He called it the water cooler theory, that if people talk about the next day and we're like, does it make sense that A, B, and C happened? He didn't care. He just cared that you believed it in the movie. And I'm not sure if that stands up, because you can say to yourself, honestly, something was in the back of my mind the whole time I was watching it. I didn't really buy it. So maybe that's the system. Maybe that actually, even if it's in the back of your head, maybe that means maybe he'd agree that his film failed. Anyways, this is another system, very much like what I was showing before. The art dealer comes in, they wave at the artist. And you don't see where the platform hits the ground, and you basically buy it. It's the same thing here. If you thrust somebody's head in here, here's the second art dealer. Oh, are we, am I on time? Hi, am I late? And here's a third person. Here's their nose. You basically accept it. And that as long as you don't see where they land, here's a fourth person. That's what they're doing here and what they're doing here. Basically, you believe big, medium, small, and then whatever the Human Torch is here, kind of in between. I guess he's been between the girl and the thing. So here's the art dealer. he's waving, and there's the artist down here. And this is kind of an interesting composition, isn't it? The way he's just barely caught and visible, framed by that figure's nose, kind of makes an interesting compositional element. Here's this guy's cigarette, and we start to get into this interesting push-pull. This guy's glasses are coming out. It kind of frames this character in this sort of electrifying manner, as long as I avoid my tangent lines. This is something else you find in these really amazing artists, is that they're so clean about their lines. This shape down here is kind of interesting. The negative space gets kind of interesting. And this is another one, right? Beautiful frame. Kirby just went completely nuts designing this guy's armor. I don't even know what to compare it to, like something Lady Gaga would wear, you know, so it's absolute next level theater. Fancy headdress, fancy armor. It would be interesting to see how he draws this in the subsequent frames, because he has to stay consistent. And he kind of gets away with it. Look how little of it he shows here and here. That's pretty smart. So he backed himself into a corner, drawing this crazy armor, and then he has to do it twice. And then it's just the headdress. There he is again. Pretty hard, but look at there. He's in shadow. So the shoulder pads and the helmet are not that complicated. And it's much like Crumb. He fools you into thinking like he's drawn it in every frame, but you only see his chest plate in one other frame. Pretty genius. And then he starts taking it off. Of course he does, because Kirby realized he backed himself into a corner. That's really funny. So anyways, a lot of these, this is another frame. You got big green guy, medium white guy, small red-haired figure. And he does this again and again. Look at this. This is like, again, like a musical, like this fantastic background with these big splashy, almost psychedelic patterns on the wall, and everything else is just made up. They're on a round surface, and you have Mr. Big, Mr. Medium, Mr. Little. Again here, again here, again here, overhead shot here. And when he does do real perspective, it feels weird. Doesn't this feel a little bit off? Not that you don't believe it and that it doesn't work, but if you really broke it down and he had to go in and take another pass at it and make sure that he had figured out all the elements, I think it doesn't seem like that foot is in the right spot. At this angle, that's the floor. Okay, there's the answer right there. That's the floor that they're on. Why is that horse guy's foot not way up here? How is it like down here? He was just doing this stuff fast and knew that you were the vitality of the image was going to sell it, and that people were going to look at it in 2 seconds and not really be looking at, they didn't know people would be looking at it 70 years later, 50 years later, excuse me. Overhead perspective, fragment of the body. Yeah, again and again, he's doing like this BS version of it. But this is interesting. This is another artist. Who is that? Wow, great frame. Okay, this is actually a later comic. It's Carmen Infantino. I love this image because it's just what we were looking at. Big figure, medium figure, small figure. Look how he cut off the ground. And that's an interesting trick, something that I always feel like is a cheat. See the foot? The ground is right below where the foot would appear. He's just saving himself the work of drawing the ground because it's more work. This guy barely fits into the frame. And I guess because he's on fire and he's writhing, his hip is probably laying on the ground here and his body's lifting up, which you could say is a really effective, maybe almost heightens the violence. I just think that Carmen Infantino didn't care about this page and was being lazy. Maybe I don't give him the same credit I give Kirby, because Kirby is more of an innovator. But I like this page a lot, but one of the reasons I have it in this PDF is because look at this car. This car is absolute nonsense. He didn't figure out the perspective at all. And as a result, it looks like it's the size of a city bus compared to these people. He could have solved that. This is idealized perspective. I think these lines line up and they're not tapering. So to make these little people back here work, he needed to have done a multi-level thing. If he had had this be like, this is a parking lot and it kind of rolls, like something a kid could skate on, and this is one line, and here's a larger figure here, he could have totally sold it. These people are walking down here, but they're on a lower level. In fact, it doesn't even have to roll. It could be a hard angle. Like maybe you have to walk downstairs here to get down to that area. Does that make sense, everybody? So in my mind, it's a lot like the Chris Ware image, where things don't get smaller until they're drastically fall apart. They're drastically far away. Like in the first frame where the guy is out, there's a bench outside the window that's small. This is more bullshit perspective. The bed doesn't match the wall at all. I like it. I like that he's just doing these shortcuts because he needs to. But I also think that, like Mobius said, you got to figure out the real rules of perspective before you can break these things with confidence. So here, look at how nothing in this world gets smaller. This guy, if he came over and used this sink over here, he'd be standing here and he'd be the same size. You can tell by how that pot is sized. It's the same size as his dinner plate. So nobody is getting smaller in this world, even when they walk over 15 feet away. But there's a park bench out here, which is tiny, and there's a fence out here, which is tiny. That is, again, like the art dealer looking at the artist on a lower level. So, sorry, 1 second. Go to my other window, share content screen. Does anybody have any questions before I go on? So to summarize, we've looked at here's a few of the cheats we talked about. So Crumb and Eileen are talking, and the walls behind them are covered with images or like this. Some of you might be saying, Josh, aren't you always saying stay away from 90-degree lines? I think that's part of the reason they need these geometric blacks coming in. I'll make it gray here, because that adds a geometry that breaks up the flatness. So again, it's like Snoopy's doghouse. This is the one that makes me the most nervous, honestly. I'm always afraid that the frame is going to end up being very dead, but you can do it if you want to. It definitely works, especially surrounded by other frames that are angled. Levels. Art dealer, waving. Here's a railing. Artist. This works. This works. Here's a ladder for him to get down. So it doesn't matter what perspective I'm using down here. That looks good too. Did I figure this out? And I just guesstimated, right? Saying to myself, I know things get slightly smaller as they go away from me. This is going to work. Whereas this is more idealized perspective. So you figure out which one works for you. This is what I would call a man-made environment, and here's a more organic environment. So if this is a scene that takes place in the mountains, obviously it'd be easy to do this. But then you might think to yourself, well, do I have to have a narrative where people are in nature? I'm having two people and they're arguing, they're on a mountain, they're lost, or waving the map around. Look, here's a forest. There's trees, there's another mountain, there's, and now we start to add on some man-made elements as well, so that things can go hand in hand. If this works, and then I think, cool, I just wish I was doing a narrative that was in a more rocky environment. Just remember, you can always have people walking around in an environment that has some of these elements. If I'm having two people talking about child custody or some other conflict, or, you know, going to bankruptcy or hostile takeover at the record company or whatever, there's no reason this can't be, sidewalk could be broken. There could be it could be built on an area where the ground is kind of uneven. Doesn't even mean that you're in a shitty area. It just means that when they built that, you know, city, they weren't able to completely level the ground. It happens, you know, it happens in all kinds of sleek cities. So if it's a broken sidewalk, it would be like this. And if it's a nice, clean, like, you know, well-maintained city, you could also have this. Now, here's a sidewalk, and then here's a bunch more buildings over here. And here's a mountain. So you can have different elements. Looks like they're in Denver. And as soon as it's bumpy, you know, you don't have to worry about people kind of looking like they belong in the environment together. I'm sorry, you don't have to worry about being as uptight about making the elements making the perspective work. You can make more mistakes. So they're talking about the hostile takeover at work of the record company, and the ground's uneven, and here's a wall behind them. I don't really know how this looks like. This building is probably settled here a little bit beyond where their feet are. I'm just going to guesstimate. And here's another one, and it's like on a whole nother trajectory, like so. In fact, maybe they went to, it's a grassy area in front of the work. This could be a corporate office. So you can have the two things together. So levels is one of my favorite. Flattening a space is another one. And if you want to figure out real perspective, warping things and making it a little bit round, or making it round and uneven is really great as well. But what I want us to do right now is to do one of these. I want you to create an image where you decide on a horizon line, start to build a room or whatever the space is, something basic. It could be a block here. I'm doing Crazy Cat, and I want to have two characters who are standing here talking to each other. And I'm going to make this block go towards the horizon line. Really basic elementary perspective exercise, right? If I want to, you can, this is one trick about perspective. If you want to make less moving parts, you can make this side of it squared up, like it's with the bottom and the side of the page. If you think about it, this is a distortion as much as idealized perspective is a distortion. while I could have a car, for example, that's sitting here, or a Jeep. That is one type of perspective. Here's another where I have it going towards the same vanishing point. Roughly, right? Now, when I draw this car on top of this, front of the car, hood, top of it. If you think about it, the front of this looks fine for this image, but it doesn't really make any sense. Unless you have some kind of weird lens on your camera, it's very hard to have, if somebody abandons a TV set here, but it's leaning, it's very hard to have the front of it be flat like that and squared up with us. In reality, it's going to be more like this. So you can always do this if you want, but it's to save yourself some work. But in reality, the car would be like this. Or some version of that. Anyway, so I want you to do this, whatever the system is, whether it's a car and a block. Here's a friend talking to somebody on the ground. And what I want you to do is to graph out a grid, which I never used to do, and I started to do recently, and I don't know why I've been waiting so long. Now, one of the reasons I never did it was because I thought that there was a more complex sense of math that you had to follow to make this make sense. And much like the crumb fence, I decided that all I need to do is make A, like B further away from A than C is from B, and D a little bit further, and E a little bit further, and F a little bit further. So this gap increases. And if I make a couple of mistakes, no big deal. So each one of these, you can even do this on the side of your page where you go, and you do the little intervals of the lines, and you make each one get a little bit further apart. And then just this one is even more arbitrary, but if you want, you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I missed one and I really don't care. I'm going to erase this anyways. So I've always seen this and been like, yikes, somebody went to sciences school. I don't know how to do this, but what I've discovered, I'm going to do this on paper really quickly. This is actually really easy. It takes work and it takes time, but it doesn't take a lot of, the thinking isn't as hard as I always thought it was. Okay. These are thumbnails for a new thing that I'm doing. Let's see. In fact, I can go right into this. On this one, these guys are holding dinner trays. Their feet are here. And I'm going to angle this a little bit. That's the table the cashier's at. I just got to make sure that their hands on it kind of match the angle of this, and their height kind of makes sense with the table, and this reaches the floor at the right interval. And let's say I'm going to put a point here. I'll put a table here going towards this point. Trying just to guesstimate, thinking to myself, how tall would it be if this guy was 20 feet back? Would it reach his waist? Just kind of do a guesstimate for now. I can change it later. And then I can do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I messed up. I gotta make those get a little bit closer together. I'm gonna draw a line. That gap, the wheat may have been a little bit too much there. There we go. And I'll do more here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And these don't even get, they stay spaced the same. Take it all the way to the edges. Now it's a lot easier to make things in this world where I can imagine the figures are standing in this environment that and I'm going to draw their feet accordingly. For example, I'm going to tilt the tray accordingly. So his feet hit the ground here. And I just know there's a certain way that his feet look right. It's not going to look right if his feet are like this. They're going to conform to the angle of the ground. I'm going to put a table here. That seems right. Remember, the horizon line doesn't have to be in the room. So if there's a wall here and I can't see it, the room is still going to conform to the laws of it. But I could also do this where maybe there's another room back here. And if I'm slightly off, I don't think it really matters. There's some paintings on the wall. Don't worry about the tray tapering back too much. It's so far away from us. It's not like it's barely, almost imperceptibly going to be narrowing as it goes back. That was one of the first things I learned about perspective. My first teacher, I asked him, I was drawing a toaster and I asked him, how much should the toaster be receding as it goes back? And he said, it's a toaster, it's that big. So not very much. His table gets a little bit bigger. There's a toaster on top of it. It's just a small object that the range is almost, it happens almost imperceptibly. If you're the size of an ant, if you're Paul Rudd in the Ant-Man movie and you're looking at a toaster, then you can have a toaster that looks like this. Or on a smaller page, this, because it's about how close you are to it, how statuesque it is. But pick up a toaster and look at it. It's not going to do this until I bring it right to my eyeball. If I hold it back at arm's length, it's like that. And if I want to eschew real perspective, like I would an idealized perspective, I can get rid of that distortion altogether. Back leg back here, I'll make it black. Here's a chair. It's pretty fun to do this. Now that I set out this grid, all of this furniture, I can draw a lot more confidently. So if that's a garbage can, it really looks like it belongs in that environment. Even when I erase the grid, having had it be there is going to have informed the work in a way that it looks more solid and more stable. Okay, what about this wall? Here's another wall. Here's a ceiling. And I've got a whole room. Here's a painting on the wall going towards the vanishing point. And here's their shadows. So I've been finding that anything that I draw is aided by the system. Not anything, but a lot of things. Let's find another.
Can you do another example, Josh?
Sure. Let me redraw this frame. And this one, Jeez, I haven't been happy at this page all this time, but yeah, let's do this guy. Let's make this better. See, look how many of these solutions that I'm trying to use in this page. He's looking at a window, there's random buildings, there's flat stuff back here. But with this one, it's a wide shot. So yeah. Okay, he's here. I have a figure. I can see him through the paper, even if you can't. He's walking across the room. He's holding a little piece of paper. There's text here. I'm not gonna be able to see a lot of this imagery. Pick a horizon line. It could be random, just commit to one. Pick a vanishing point on the horizon line, which is the point that theoretically these lines would converge. That's the definition of it. It's the vanishing point. How did I figure out these lines? All I did is I imagined I had a ruler and I'm just putting little intervals across it, like the belt holes in a belt. On this side, what I'm going to do is we're going to go low to high, or close to far. Meaning that over here on the side, I'm going to go, and I'm going to do close, close, close. See, a tiny bit further away. It's a weird head trip. You can think, you notice on the last one, like these, I think I'm going further and I'm not. I'm making them all the same. So I got to be careful about that. I'm going to go back like this. Far, nearer, 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 meaning the lines are nearer to each other until it's okay if they're right on top of each other back here. So now when I build this room, that's the wall, or that's the wall. By the way, I cheated and warped that a little bit, no big deal. Here's a desk push against the wall. It's a square. Here's somebody seated at that desk. This is all stuff I should have done for that drawing and I got lazy. Here's some other office mates back here talking. Double line for the top of the desk. Try to make myself comfortable with just having a very narrow sliver of the top of the desk up here. I forgot to draw a chair, so I'm going to have them sitting on like a little cylinder, like maybe I can sell it that it's a stool. They're so small, who cares? Double line for the floor, for the edge of the wall. And do I want to kind of guesstimate these, or do I want to kind of sketch them in more, where I figure out the angles these paintings will be? I feel better about kind of having blocked them out a little bit more carefully. That's not bad. All right. I gotta be careful. I want to make sure these co-workers back here having coffee. That they're not bigger than this guy. That's just not going to make sense. Here's one more of them. It's not bad. They're so small. One of the tricks for making people, I've given a whole lecture before on doing miniatures. One of the things that you see in old comics is that when there is an art to making people small, one thing you can do is this. See how the arms are triangles? And then you could do this. You add on the hand and the wrist is missing. You add on the head and the neck is missing. You add on the feet and the ankles are missing. So it doesn't matter if those things don't connect. You can also do this where you put one leg in shadow. Looks more like they're both trying to catch a baseball. And they can get more shadowy as they go back. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to see them. So that's what I did here. The back leg is black. And now I've got this guy. I think I can draw this twice. Maybe I'll paste this in. Cool. Seems like I should either do tiles on the floor or put a rug or something. If I put a rug, that means that these lines are going to taper just a little bit and go down and over. This takes place in the 70s. It feels like it's more of a rug era. Under the desk, over, around.
Is that
behind it.
Bristol board, Josh?
Over here, it's water. Oh, yeah, it is. It's Bristol board, and then this is just like cheap paper.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been going back and forth as between Bristol and watercolor. In fact, this is half and half. See how it's slightly a different color? I glued these together. So these three
Right.
frames were cut out of my watercolor.
Uh-huh.
Top 3 frames are on Bristol. Sometimes I'm just changing it up just for the sake of having a different feel at my fingertips.
So when it's printed, you can't tell? How
No,
does-
not at all. Just like on an old photocopier, if you increase contrast, your grays go away. You can do the same thing digitally. So all the work that you've seen of mine in print, it's all started like this, and it all has tons of paste ups on it. The paper is a different color. It can be slightly yellow or slightly white. That's one of the first things that you do when you scan, is that you go to your settings and you increase the contrast just a little bit, and
Huh.
it makes the whites indistinguishable from each other.
But you don't do that yourself, do you? Do you take it somewhere
The adjustments or
or?
scan.
Yeah.
I do all that myself. The only thing
Oh.
that I can't do
Oh,
is I can't put stuff in InDesign. It's just a skill that I haven't learned, and I haven't invested in learning. Everything else, my scanning, my adjusting, my cleaning up. Sometimes I clean things up digitally. That's all done. I do that myself. And then I do I color it all digitally, and that's a whole other process.
what
But-
is the machine? What do you use to do all that? Is it a,
No, it's a good question.
Printer?
The scanner is an Epson.
oh, okay, I see, scanner. Okay.
The scanner's an Epson, and it goes to your device, and then you drag them into Photoshop. And I do all the adjustments I just talked about in Photoshop.
Okay.
But I've got a lot of students who are like you, who you've mastered a lot of the cartooning aspect of it. I don't necessarily expect you to master the post-production stuff of it. And it's okay to work with collaborators, to hire people, and I can
Yeah.
recommend people. You can also network at SAW. There might be people
Yeah.
who do part-time work. You could ship them your pages if you
Right.
trust them, have them scan it and ship them back to you. I
Yeah,
would think that would be more worthwhile for me, because I can tell by the questions, you don't have this you don't have these
No.
skills at your fingertips, and you would have you'd have years or hours or however you want to find it. You have a lot of time to make up for in terms of covering that ground, and I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think it's alone, and I don't think there's anything I don't think that there's anything to feel bad about in terms of not knowing those skills.
okay.
I feel like we've done some things that are designed to make your stuff reproducible. The fact that you do black and white work is going to make your stuff a lot more reproducible than it would be if you were doing full color.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons that we look at Gilbert and people like that who manage to get what I'm doing here which is to get a sense of contrast and variety that you'd be used to seeing with color done
Mhm.
just with line.
Okay.
So one thing I was going to ask people to do today, and we can put these together, is this, and this just feels really weird, but it pays off. See how these little dots that I'm doing? It's the damnedest thing. I've seen it for years in art and always been like, who has the time to sit there and do polka dots and do cross hatching? But I really like it. So Gilbert has a lot of people wear suits, or you've got a wall, and it's this, right? Dash, 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 dash. You might have somebody wearing a suit or jeans, and he doesn't want to draw a denim fabric, and he does the dots and they stand in for a clothing fabric. This is something where I gotta be careful that I'm not going to get lazy as I go up. I find that sometimes when you put the final dot in place, it has a whole different look than it does if you stop halfway through and said, I've done enough. So you got to be a completist about this stuff. And then if I do a crosshatch on top of this, or a really dense crosshatch, the dots help it. It gives it this sort of light pattern. So that's what I'm doing here, and that's what I'm going to ask you to do today, as well as I'll review a couple other Gilbert techniques. I am doing these spirals on the rug because I've been finding that also really is something that he uses a lot, that can quickly fill in an environment. So here's these guys. Here's a wall behind them. I'll do some more junk on the walls. And then I'll do another Gilbert technique, which is to just do vague gray hatching in the background. This guy's looking at a piece of paper. It's in front of him. Good. There's too much junk back here. I'm afraid it's going to distract. Oh yeah, that's what I did in the original. I had a wall right here. So that's cool. I can actually don't need to draw this stuff. I'm just going to put something right here. Maybe it's another desk. And let's try this tweed pattern here as well. Dot, 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 dot. You can experiment with different thicknesses of pen as well. In fact, let's try the desk with thin dots and thick lines and thick cross hatching, and the wall with thick dots and thin cross hatching. That makes sense. Okay, so here, this one is going to have thick lines like that, but thin hatches. That's interesting, isn't it? They feel completely different. This one is going to have thin lines. Not completely, but a little bit different. I like that a lot. It's so much richer. That's the advantage of this technique. This thing, dash, dash, and maybe I don't have to shade the top of this. So I can even have a few different contrasting patterns. It really depends on what I think is best, what feels best to me. So this guy has thick dots or dashes, and thin lines for hatching. For hatches, that sounds like it rhymes. And this is the opposite. Thick lines for dots or dashes. I'm sorry, thin lines for dots or dashes, and thick lines for hatching. So I'm going to commit to that. It's really interesting. Those feel like two very different textures to me. As usual, if anything's missing, ask yourself, did I connect all my lines? It's interesting to see how I can still blow it. I don't know what was going on off this page. Was I working too late at night? Was I taking too many shortcuts? But I have to go back to, if I'm going to make this work, still possible I can make this work, even though there's a desk here, which is the size of Candyland or something. Maybe if I obscure this, it can feel a little bit more dreamlike, as if it's disappearing into a little bit of a black fog. I use better pens here. That's one advantage. If you look at it, it's marginally different, but these lines from him at least are a little bit more delicate. And I also didn't do that hatching. But let me do this, go right up to the edge of him. And then have it continue over here. Makes me a little bit nervous because I don't want to lose his leg when I do that, but that actually works good. This is the area that I was really falling short on, is over here. I didn't have the shadow go through one leg and out the other. It's kind of amazing how much there is left to do, and how much, even though I teach these classes, I have the same challenges, and I have the same panels that fall apart as anybody. I guess it's the same way that, not that I'm the greatest, right, by any stretch, but I guess it's the way I've been listening to a lot of interviews with Fugazi lately, the band. And, you think about how many bands, who go into the studio to do an album, it just turns out bad. You don't know why. Sometimes the more experienced you are, the more you have a plan. Sometimes it's sort of magic is missing. Other times you plan too much and it's good because you're spontaneous. But so the creative process is something you're always chasing. And sometimes just winging it is great. It's what the thing needed. In this case, I wasn't happy with it. And I'm going to go ahead and do those dots. These lines are thin, the hatch lines. So it makes sense to do thick lines for the dashes. I was going to push that hand out, and on his sleeve, I think it's going to be especially interesting. Okay, so right now, looks like whatever, like leopard spots. My trust is that if I go all the way to the top, when I put the last one in place, it's all going to kind of what's the right word? Congeal. We'll say congeal for now because I can't think of the right word. Not terrible. And it's interesting to see how it looks when we back up. Not bad. I think a big question is, does it look okay from a distance and in context of the whole page? My eye goes into a suit now in a better way. So I can do that again if you need me to, show you what I did, but at the same time, I also want you to do this. This is going to be one of my areas of focus today. Like I said, I've had a lot of success with doing these dashes lately. Takes a lot of work and time, but it's also kind of meditative. I've been finding that when you look at a crosshatch, when these little dashes exist, the work has more of a texture to it. You're almost unconscious that they're there, but you benefit from looking at them no matter what. Even at the point where they almost disappear, because I've done so many layers of hatching, they still kind of exist, and you see them giving a little bit of a flickering or a kind of a dappled look to the shadow, as if there's little imperfections going through it. When I do, I think I might have picked this up from Nancy comics, but when I think they do that, I think they sometimes at least draw Sluggo like this, or maybe I picked it up from, I think I might have picked it up from an old Mad Magazine cartoon where they drew Archie from Archie and Jughead, and Archie always had cross hatching on the side of his head. They started to have people play tic-tac-toe in the little dashes, and I found that kind of looks like a beautiful shadow, so I started to use it for real. And whenever I draw myself with like short crew cut, I'll do these dashes, and I'll go ahead and put a little dot in between each one. And when you have it next to another shadow, they contrast. Look how well that head pops out against those single lines. So here's, I don't know, I kind of doubled down on these dots like that. So it's thick dots, thin lines. And here we'll do the opposite. Thick lines. Thin dots. And you can go all the way outside the ball like this. It's kind of cool. And that's what I tried to do with this suit. So it's a really rich way of shading. How are we doing? Does anybody have any questions about anything? Do you want me to go back and clarify anything? So hopefully people have been drawing along, and try to draw, if you haven't yet, really try to follow the system, like really try to do it for yourself. Send me your progress. I'll give you some notes. Golda, I know you sent homework. if anybody, I'm not sure if I have any new stuff from anybody else, but feel free to send that if you do have it now. And we'll review your stuff in a little bit. But yeah, Golda, this could be a really interesting step for you. Your stuff is so dimensional. Your shading is so great. You have a good sense of the objects that make up an environment. And what would it look like if you really mapped out your environments and blueprinted them the way that I'm showing you today?
Yeah. I have such an aversion to perspective, but yeah, this helps.
Glad. Adding shading back here too. You know, the parts about this that are bothering me are all the things I just winged it on. I hate these little photos I did on the wall, but maybe I'll do a kind of a double vision thing. That looks better. One thing I like to do, I've taught in previous semesters, is in the background, if you want to show something that's a little bit out of focus, do a double line like this. I did it with the buildings at the window as well. So I can mix these two techniques together. Here's more people. That's good. Starting to feel like more of a cluttered office. I feel like there should be another desk here. It's bothering me. Okay, so let's see. There's my chart. There's my desk. There's your vanishing point. There we go. Here's another desk. I'll put a filling on it, and I might just glue this in. Do a little bit of the Annie thing where I do an undershadow here. Well, as we showed in previous weeks, there's not a single architectural element or physical element that Harold Gray couldn't draw and make look real, just based on a little bit of effort to make the thing shapes look okay and a lot of intense energy put into the drop shadows. So I go all the way to the edge of the wall with that, and all the way to the edge of his hand, and maybe there at the bottom of the desk. Might need to get 2 pens. I'm just going to put a phone on this. There we go, slightly smaller, which means I can do even more detailed work. Good. It's okay, yeah. There should be a drop shadow under his neck too. It's a 70s, so there could be cigarettes in the office too, with some smoke. Now I've got a conundrum about which one of these to choose. I like it though. I like both of these. Very interesting. So I'll figure this out. Both of these kind of grab my eye. And because this is the most boring area, but I have to have text there, that kind of makes sense. I might lose that little office worker. This morning, Blunt had seen a flyer making the rounds. Maybe I could even change that to this morning, Blunt had found a flyer. Nah, it needs to be another word. But anyways, let me go ahead and check my messages. Hey, Brigate, welcome. Holy cow, this is good. I love how it's glowing. Also excellent. This is one where I could see us playing with today's exercise too. If you feel comfortable with it.
Josh, sorry, say that again. I lost the audio completely. You were saying something.
Oh, that's okay. I was just saying I could even see these being used for today's exercise. So let's
Oh,
say,
yeah, I was thinking about that while doing this.
oh yeah, definitely, definitely. Let's see. Let's take this blue. Kind of weird glowy blue. There we go. So again, like off the page, I can kind of measure these to make sure that they're even, as if I took a ladder and just went chin, 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 and did the rungs of the ladder. We could do this. Though aesthetically, I think it would be nice to do this on both sides. That's amazing. That looks really good. That looks good.
Wow, thank you. Would you take a screenshot? Can I take a screenshot?
Absolutely. Always. And I'll send these to you as well.
Got it. Thank you, Josh. Wow,
Sure.
so much difference.
So we've got both versions. They both have advantages. Whoops. Oh, I thought 1 second. You did one thing. We do that again on another layer, just so we can keep both versions. Kind of like I kind of like the austerity of this, but now I'm going to do this on another layer and see if we can have both. Try it both ways. You also break these up as they get closer to us, like a value scale. There we go. Let's try this one now. Dot, line, line, So this one, I'd imagine maybe the lines were here through them and just kind of go with that. Instead of doing two vanishing points. Do the same one coming out both sides. In fact, I messed up, sorry. This one would be like this. That's cool too.
Thank you, Josh. Wow. So here and even in the other one, but here especially the implication is that it's behind her. So
Totally.
kind of, and the way my text is going is probably going and meeting that point, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that that would really be intriguing.
Yeah, it's not as hard as it looks. Yeah, just make sure keep a hierarchy of lines in mind. I would say at least 80% of these lines are getting closer
Okay.
together as they go back. And you could do this,
Okay.
too, have them get so close together that they start to mass and accumulate back here, and just see what that does to it. One of the people who did this really well was Ralph Steadman, who did art for, let's find this. Ralph Steadman, Fear and Loathing. Simple. He didn't even do the cross lines. He didn't even do the lines coming from the other direction. Just had them get closer and closer together.
Wow. And then there's the vertical ones too on the top.
Oh yeah. Interesting, right? Yeah, he gets the space in between the buildings just by having them get closer.
Wow.
He was like one of the first wild artists I was aware of as a teenager. I love this finger that almost comes to the line but doesn't. And look at the cross hatching, making up Hunter S. Thompson's face there. Just like what we were doing today, it kind of has that dappled feeling. I'll email this to everybody. Zoom. Where is the Zoom icon? That's really weird. My great. Oh, there it is. My window was closing it. Okay, I'm sending all these, the images that I did as for reference. And, the corrections for Pagate. Whoops. Cool. Golden, can we talk about this? I doubt I'm gonna have a lot of corrections. I think this looks amazing.
Josh, I just sent you something I just did.
Okay, great. Golden, can I go ahead and read it? Or do you want to read it? Oh, you're muted, I think.
I can read it.
Okay, cool.
If my aching feet could talk, they'd tell you, they'd tell you to appreciate your young feet while you got them. Smaller, arched, narrower, and most of all, cool shoes to wear. Just wait until you try to squeeze into those shoes from the past. Remember Cinderella's stepsister? Not only do your feet flatten like a pancake, they get tired and sore. So what's available to us baby boomers? Boring.
Look at these faces. This is great. I love all the little commentaries. The yikes, the word ow.
Yeah. I was trying to make it funny, funnier. And don't get me started on walking shoes. You need to.
Oh, did I skip one?
Yeah, the big sneaker. No, go back one page. It's all right. Go down. Oh, it didn't come across?
No, it's probably I probably cut it off though when I put it in. We try again.
Oh, okay.
It was first one. There it is. It's my fault. Yeah.
Okay.
Whoa, beautiful.
Thanks. And don't get me started on walking shoes. You need a PhD to pick from all the orthopedic options, and then you have to walk, run, or crawl in them. Okay. I was trying to, all right.
I love this. Look at all the hatching. Look at the sense of space. Amazing.
Well, I was trying to do the Gilbert, Hernandez thing. So why am I ranting on about feet? I somehow was invited to an event where there were tons of young and hip people. Unlike me, they had on the hottest, coolest shoes, even Nike hit heels. I couldn't believe it when I saw those anyway. And these, and she's saying, I'd give up a man for these.
I love it.
And then, okay, so I guess the last one I had changed the wording, but I don't know where it is. Let me see.
I'll get it.
I didn't like. Hold on, sorry. Just the last one is, but I had to leave because my feet were aching. I couldn't wait to kick off my orthopedic shoes and have a drink. So, yeah. I was so sick of that lettering by the time I hate the little details. I really do.
No, really? Oh, well, you mean like lettering? I think the lettering is
Yeah,
great.
yeah, and not having mark graphic, all the, it smudges and all that. Yeah.
I think this is amazing. I think it's pretty pitch perfect. If I wanted to quibble here and there, I'm noticing, I hate to say this because it's such a boring technical thing,
No,
but
that's good.
that wine glass is a little bit off.
Okay.
Oh, wait a second. There we go. I feel like you either need to move the stem over or
Okay.
move the side of it over, insert a photo.
Oh, wow. Okay, Andrea, thanks. Okay. Hmm. This
So
is
if-
is
if-
magic what you're doing.
I
Uh-huh.
know, so it's bizarre how much weird technical stuff we can do these
Yeah.
days.
Oh, it should be a lot bigger.
No, not bigger, it's just
Oh.
that the stem,
Uh-huh.
it's over on the side, so it should be a symmetrical glass. So this should be either moved over or thinner, but right now, look how much space there is here,
Mhm.
and how much space there is here. So it feels a little bit warped.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So you can move it over as long as you avoid hitting her dress, and that's a pretty easy fix. Or you can make it, that feels more symmetrical, though still not perfect. It's also this side is very pregnant.
Yeah, the other side isn't.
Exactly. So make these balanced. So that's probably really easy fix. Just nudge that over.
Yeah. I also was too lazy to do, it's a glass, so to do all the shading. I don't know.
I think you did a great job. Glasses are really challenging. This is beautiful cross hatching up here. There we go. It doesn't hurt my eye. Before, it's just this one little element that's throwing off the beautiful harmony of this page. So yeah, balance out. Bounce it out here. Balance with other side. Nudge over. Oh no, who'd we lose?
Hmm.
Oh, Carmichael had to go. Cool.
So I should move her hand too then?
No, just
Okay.
the stem. I made the pad of her hand a little bit fatter.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, Carmichael had to go. He's having a carbon monoxide alarm.
Ooh,
Ooh,
that's not good.
I've owned those things in houses for like years and they've never made a peep. I have absolutely no idea what I would do if it went
Yeah,
off.
what does it mean? I hate to be an ignoramus. What does that mean?
It means that there's not enough oxygen in your environment and you might suffocate.
God. That's intense. What is going on? Is it, I wonder if it's related to the forest fires.
Hmm.
Ugh. This is this new thing that my device does. See how I took all those photos, but they're not appearing? So give me a second, Golda. So stupid. I'm gonna go apply to Adams and I'll send you back those notes. Wow, cool. It feels like each one is stronger. The one on the bottom, is that the latest one you've done?
No, so I actually was doing that on during Thursday's class.
Hmm.
So that's Thursday, and then I did these two top ones today. Trying to use the method you were showing us.
Mhm.
1 second, I'm gonna make a couple of notes. Still not there. Okay, they'll show up later.
Stop.
Ugh. All right, cool. So there's another element to perspective that we didn't talk about yet, and I want to back up and talk to you about. These are good. There's another element. There's kind of a sense of the horizontal is working well, the vertical, the other not so much. And I want to show you all over the place. Canvas, crop and resize. So this is another exercise I want you to do. Like the one thing that isn't quite gelling with these is the floor is working good. This stuff is random. Like your this doorway is in idealized perspective, and I can help you get around that. With the way the top of the doorway would also go right to the stop, but I didn't really talk about that today.
Okay.
This table could also go to the stop, which means that you're going to end up with a table that has, or a bed. Actually, it's a bed. Might end up looking like this, where you just see a sliver of the top. And that means the figure that's here is going to be like that.
Oh,
Cool. That looks pretty good, though.
It does.
This as well would be a little bit more like that, or like that, or you could warp it and have it be like that. Love this. This is cool too, the kind of railing thing. This one as well, the top of this would be, let's say the horizon line is like roughly here. That's where these are going, more or less. That means the top of this would be angled just a little bit, like so. Top of the roof is good or goodish, but then this wall would also have to get kind of conform.
Yeah, a little more angled back.
Yeah.
Cool.
So let me go over the basics of defining all the terms and kind of the principle of horizon lines, vanishing points, difference between 1 point and 2 point, and we're going to ignore 3 point. So when I was in school, I'd always had people bat around the terms of perspective and never really understood it. And then I had Sal Amendola, who was an old DC Comics guy, come, and he was a guest speaker in one of my classes. And he kind of broke down the rules of perspective, like in a real elementary kind of way. And it was really what I needed to hear. Until then, I just kind of was like, I'm going to do everything but one perspective. So the first thing he did was define what a horizon line is. And the second thing is he defined what a vanishing point is. I never really understood them. I'd always get them flip-flopped. The horizon line is the edge where you can no longer see the ground anymore. It's also, the vanishing point is the point where two lines of a wall or anything that has dimension are theoretically going to converge. We know these things get smaller as they go back. And it's the point where these things converge. You see people screwing around with perspective all the time. I'll show you later on this funny Dash Shaw image where he just kind of has made up perspective, and lots of people use like anti-perspective or the kind of rule breakers that we looked at today. But that means that after this is kind of what we did today, but then you're also trying to deal with these walls. So we have the sides of these things as well. If there's a painting here or a window on this building, we're trying to deal with not just mapping things out this way, but mapping them out vertically as well, which is what these are. So what Sal had us do was draw a line, pick a vanishing point. You can put it in the middle, but you don't have to. And it could be up here, but it could also be down here. It could be up here. It could be in the middle. It's one of the things that Carmichael said when I talked to him about perspective was he has trouble deciding where the horizon line should be. And I think it is important to commit once you put it on here. So if this is something where I'm doing a box and another box and another box, this is what Sal had us do. And I realize it's a great exercise because it makes you have to do a box or a rectangle or whatever that is below the line, straddling the line, and above the line. And of course, by doing a box, you're going to end up doing a box with 4 sides. So you're going to have to do not just this, the front of it, and not just the back of it, which you also got to do. It means you got to do a line like this. And you got to do dots, dot, 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 and try to do a nice symmetrical square here. If you find that you missed, like I kind of missed my target right here, just make the dot bigger and you can kind of bullshit your way through it. And it helps to put these dots on to remind yourself where the end of the box is. Otherwise, it's easy to get confused, and especially using paper like you are. So also be aware this is going to happen. No big deal. That's what's happening right now is, let's say this line, this corner is red. Oops. This corner is red. And let's say this piece is purple. The red and the purple are like getting superimposed over each other. In fact, let me do that like this. And what Sal said was that just remember this happens to experienced draftspeople. If you have the 2 lines, this wall getting superimposed with this wall, he's like, don't worry, that happens. Just go with it. Right. So that was another good thing. It's like when I used to practice this stuff, something like that would happen. I would think I made a mistake. So what Sal had us do was this. Again, I'm doing a sloppy version, but it's still working basically. And you got to do all 4 sides, all 4 lines. And then go to the end of it. Oh, and Andrea, I'm going to look at yours in a second too. I'm sorry, I rushed right past you.
Not to worry, I was super late.
And that looks okay. They can see just using common sense. This is a rectangle and that's a square. So I did something wrong. I probably wanted these to be a little bit more like that, a little bit more commensurate. So you got to do all 4 sides and then shade in one side. Great exercise Sal had us do. I thought it kind of covered all the bases with perspective, and I've done it. And when I did it, I realized that even though I didn't walk out understanding everything about perspective, I was so much better at it. And at the time we were doing a class where we drew outside. So you're constantly drawing the world around you. And I would just have to guesstimate it. I just have to be like, okay, I'm drawing a park and there's a library next to it and there's a fence next to me. I'm just going to try to draw the fence, doing, this as it goes away from me. And it was a lot easier after doing Styles' lesson.
Wow.
So do this, do one high, one low, one medium, do all 4 sides, shade in one side. And then when you're done with this, I want you to do another exercise, which is, see if I can make this bigger. Flatten this. Oh, and by the way, before I get here, let me also just say, so let's say this fella is standing on a box. And there's a building next to him. And there's a box up here. Floating, maybe it's a elevated subway platform or one of those police surveillance boxes that they used to set up. I haven't seen one for a while. Maybe it's the neighborhood that I'm living in. So this and this, just guesstimating really quick, seeing what's the difference between his head and the corner of that box. Let's say it's right there. And the building is a little bit to his left. I can't really fit it in, but it would be, let's see, right there. And the top of the building is above his head, somewhere about there. These are actually the same shots from different angles. So just like on a, you're on a, if you're like taking a photograph and you're kneeling, you might see a box like this. As you slowly raise up, the horizon line is going to drop, and you'll see maybe more of this as you go from a crouch to more like this view. A lot of moving pieces, I know. So before I go on to, I was getting too ahead of myself. So draw this, and then you can turn it into an environment. Maybe this is a truck or couch. Maybe this is a balcony. Go ahead and attach this to the bottom of a building. This is just like a block of cement or something. And like I said, this will be some kind of weird surveillance tower or a higher balcony. Even the feet, I just guesstimated this, and that's okay, but I'm going to go back. Imagine the front of this is like a big sheer piece of plywood. And then just get rid of the middle part, and I've got these 2 legs, and it follows the same laws. That was my guesstimate, and my guesstimate was just a little bit off. I guessed right there for the foot, but it's actually here. What else was I going to say? There's something I was going to add to this. And now we'll do the ground thing, which will help me, I think, with figuring out if this building makes sense. Yeah, I feel like there's just a tiny bit more to the building. I can also test it to see if feels like he's out of sync with the figures that are below him, but you know what? I can just do my bullshit cheat and just put it off the page. And then it kind of makes sense that feels like by the size of these figures, this guy was way closer to us. That makes more sense. Here's the door. This is all making more sense. And here's somebody going into their building down here. I know I was going to define. So there's one more term I didn't define. So I defined the horizon line, which is the end of the floor, basically, where you can 4 stops and you can see sky, which means that you might not always, it might sometimes be invisible to us. There might be, even in an image where you have a vast vista behind you, it could be this behind mountain range, or the mountains are behind bushes. So you'll never see it, but it's there. And that's okay. It's it could be a theoretical point. That's a horizon line. So in a room, yeah, it's not there in the room. It's like when you have a couch. The horizon line might be, if you're at 87th Street, it might be, theoretically up by 89th or something, the point where the couch would actually disappear. The room you're in is all governed by the same laws that govern the couch. The walls itself are like, it's just another box. So the room is also governed and determined by where those vanishing points are. Here's a TV. There's the vanishing point. It's okay to draw the cube, and then you can turn it into anything. Once you can draw these cubes, you can say, cool, I'll just cut out the middle of it. I've got a couch, do an X, do another X, and then it's a lot easier to find this kind of an old-fashioned TV, how to make that box within the box look good. Same with the window. Here's a window. Do an X, do another X, and then it's a lot easier to figure out where the cross beams would be, or where the and then these two, you can see they're not lining up at the vanishing point. It doesn't really matter. Jack Kirby would just say, I'm going to live with it. But if you want to, you could do that and have them all going towards the vanishing point. So we define the vanishing point, we define the horizon line. We haven't defined the what I call it before, the eye line. Yeah, the eye line. So the eye line is not anybody that's in the scene. This guy could have no head. He could have, he could be like a big weird monster, like in Yo Gabba Gabba, where his eye is down here. It's not his eye. It's not the readers of the comic's eye or the viewer's eye, unless it's like one of those Facebook images that kind of warps, like as you're looking at it, like where you kind of start to flip your screen and it starts to angle. The image is going to stay the image, whether if it's a painting, if I'm looking at it at the ground, I'm not going to be able to see any more of the sky, right? Than the artist showed. I'm not going to be able to see more of the ground if I go up here. So it's not the viewer's eye, it's the architect, it's the artist's eye. It's like you envision a scene in your head, and it's like you take a mental snapshot, and it's that view that you chose when you took the snapshot. So if I'm doing Spider-Man and I decide I want him flying over the city, I got to commit to this angle for the rest of the image. I might measure everything off this building. If there's a higher building, or if this building goes up higher. But I pictured the shot when I took a mental snapshot, and I just got to commit to it. Of course, I can jam things in here. Here's a flagpole with maybe, another Spider-Man here. And it goes right off the page. And here's a third Spider-Man where I just see their head. And now we're back in that territory where you're having things coming off the composite from outside the composition. But the eye line is the artist's eye line, the architect.
Wow.
So since we're doing
How that's different from the horizon line.
the horizon line, I think it's the same. I have to do my math on this. Yes. It's the point where things level out, I think. I usually just put I think that actually, if you really measured it, the middle of my pupil was probably right there. And the eye line also happens to be, and this is an exercise I could show you later, where, let's say you're looking at a brick wall, right? Each one of these is angled. This one is high on the right and low on the left, high, low. And then up here, all of a sudden, it's high on the left and low on the right, high, low. The point where they level out, where they're balanced, that's the eye line. Right now, it's even. And so what happens is you're walking around the world all day. You're not usually flying up where Spider-Man is, but you might see this outside your window. The point where the line goes straight is the eye line. And all the windows above this are going to angle more and more and more. And everything above us goes down more and more and more. So if we have time, the other exercise I like to do is have you do a building without doing the vanishing points, but by just approximating. If I do a shelf here, all I got to do is make a ladder like this and then start to tilt them. And the point where they level out, things are going to flip after this, where the tilt is on the other, it's on the other, the shoe's on the other foot. Here, the right side is low. So I'll put RL, though that might be confusing. R low, low. Oops. Sorry. R high. Right low. It's low. And the left is high. High. Slightly high. Very slightly. And then probably right underneath. Actually, it's even. Sorry. Very slightly high or even. And then it's left is low. And then the left is even lower. And then the left is even lower. So as long as you don't overshoot your mark, as long as you don't have, that looks pretty good too, they're almost even, but maybe a tiny bit angled lower. As long as you don't overshoot your mark, you can't like have that happen. Looks like it's a broken shelf. If this one's going that high, that one's even higher. And it's like taking your foot off a brake. You got to make the inner, this is okay, but it's a little bit sudden. Just slowly make it happen and it'll look better. So a little bit leaning more and more. I'll just sell it like it's a wall, which is about to tip over actually. Oh, cool. Andrea, good. Really rich. It feels very much like a Red Grooms image.
Oh, really? I love red grooms.
Yeah, it's great.
Actually, in the time that you were doing critique, I inked a little more, but the question that I have remains, which was like, I was just sort of trying to do this extreme perspective image of this like crazily long room and like furniture angles that are a little off.
Yeah.
And I got to the bookcase that's behind the kid and the spaceship on the right side. And I kind of like hit a wall, like literally. The bookcase is away from the wall. What shape is it supposed to be? I'm so confused.
Yeah, let me see if I can do something to do something to resolve. So let's see. Yeah, I see these jumbled up lines here. And yeah, you got to pick one. Maybe do this. Imagine that there's a big door frame around it and keep those lines nice and clean.
Mm-hmm.
And then go back to you. If I like these wobbly lines, But yeah, you got to make some decisions now on each one of these. How much of the bottom do you see? There it is going back. Shade this maybe.
Yeah, because you definitely should see the inside left wall of the bookcase.
Right. And depending
Yeah,
on,
like that.
yeah. So this is always a tricky one. This looks pretty good, right?
Mhm,
It to me, this is such high math, but
mhm,
it's like I'm seeing the top of this all of a sudden. This is a level one, and it's basically level. And
mhm,
I don't see, like right here, I'm seeing the bottom, the butt of the floor or the underside of the shelf.
mhm,
I'm seeing a lot of the underside of the top, the ceiling of it.
mhm.
A lot less, none, and then little of the top,
Mhm.
significant amount, and then we're seeing more of the top.
Yep. So then what do you do about the right side of the bookcase to indicate that it has depth? Oh, it's over there. It's
Yeah,
over
use
there.
that as your marker, as your demarcation. And it's
Uh-huh.
kind of interesting with this aesthetic. This is actually a little bit thinner than the other side, but that kind of fits the warpness that you want. If you want to
Yeah.
be perfect, you can make it like that.
Yeah, I kind of want it like warped and a little like, yeah, exactly. Like kind of wider at the top is kind of funny.
It is. So yeah, I found, because I've also been that person, I can see at the top you were going like this and kind of losing the integrity of the 2x4s or the
Right.
or whatever they are, not 2x4s, but plywood planks that made it up. And you got to bring those back and have
Mhm.
that going on.
Yeah.
A, and then B is go over like that. And I've gotten mixed up on this a bazillion times.
Yeah, this is what I was trying to think about, and it was making my brain hurt. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, love this. Try to, when you do cylindrical shapes,
Hmm.
try to keep them. I've given the metaphor of the coffee cup a bunch of times. You're
Hmm.
bringing a coffee cup up to your eye line, and eventually it's going to be like this, where it's a very flattened oval,
Hmm.
but it always stays curved.
At the
It's the temptation is to be like, oh, it's like a football. And some
Yeah.
people do this where they pinch it. No, it always stays a very narrow, squashed rim.
Okay. Yeah. Do you get that this is supposed to be one of those like crappy cheap ceiling fixtures?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, totally. I have one.
Okay. Okay, cool. Can I have a picture of all of that?
Got it.
Sorry, I'm on my phone.
No, not all. I mean, I do that every class. I send all these photos. Okay, sent. I want to reply all photos to. Oh yeah, and the glass that I fixed for Golda's here too. And yeah, notice Adam, the only thing we didn't talk about is 3-point. Okay, so here's one more thing to talk about. This is really interesting. So, oops. Screen size. This is another thing that Sal clued me into the first time that he gave that lecture. He said to us, okay, so you got these boxes, right? This is a 1-point perspective drawing, and this is the other term you want to define. The horizon line is the end of the world where the sky meets the earth. The vanishing point is the point on that line where those lines converge. And if you do this, this is one definition of a 2-point perspective drawing. If this guy is looking at it's tilted a different way, then it is going to hit, as long as all these things are angled the same way or on the same surface, they are going to hit a different line on the same a different point on the same horizon line. So if this is a cityscape, you get a lot of 1-point, you can do a lot of 1-point perspective with cities, because here's a sidewalk and we just tend to build everything in a really anal symmetrical way. The buildings tend to be lined up. The sidewalk tends to be in front of the buildings. The trucks and cars tend to be lined up with the sidewalk, which are lined up with the buildings. The sidewalk on the other side is lined up with the left side, the buildings, et cetera, right? So everything is just our love of order as people. As soon as somebody turns a corner or parks their car in a double parks it or whatever it is, where you park it at parks in the wrong zone, you got this. And it's okay to have the car, the vanishing point, be outside of where you can see. You can also draw the car, guesstimating it, and then test it. See if these vanishing points actually hit these lines hit the vanishing point the way that you intended. So those sides don't, but those do. And then I can turn this into a car. And this is also a good opportunity to talk about how we draw cars. A car can be a block, and then you put another block on top of it. Another definition of 2-point is this, which is a little bit more of the common definition of it. Both sides of this are both going to go to a different point on the horizon line. And again, I got to warp that a little bit to make that work. There we go, like that, and like that. Now all that's left is for me to do an angle on the window, and it kind of looks like an old Studebaker. I like to draw the wheels as squares and have them really going up into the body of the car. Again, you could do a square and then cut out the round shape like a sheet cake. And we've got a box, a rectangle, and then another rectangle laying on top of this one. Make sure that you position it so that the wheels aren't like over here in the middle of the door or something. There's a certain degree of distance between the driver's side window and the headlight where the wheel is, and the same thing on the back. And if you pass that threshold, you kind of know it. Then you angle this and you angle this. Here's another little tire over here. It's a good idea to draw the tires, even though it takes more work, it's more satisfying. You want it to be like a big discus with a side like that. And you can get this by drawing a square and then carving the circle out of the square. There's the circle, there's an X, there's another X, there's the other side of it, and then there's the front of it. So we do a one on paper. So my basic platform of how cars looks I really steal a lot of cars from 1940s comics and stuff, which of course they don't look like anymore, but I can show you how to turn this into a modern car. So you draw a brick, draw another brick, might as well keep this line parallel with this line and this line and this line. Right now it's idealized perspective, so I'm not even really having it go back towards the horizon line. Don't do this. Sometimes I do this, and then when I look at what people have done, they've done some kind of weird thing that looks like a it looks like that car, Luke Skywalker's like wheelless car. I forget what you call those. No, it's not like short like that, unless it's a really special
Pod
car. It's
racer.
the same way. Pod racer. I never would have remembered that. Why is it a pod? So there's a square, there's a rectangle, there's a rectangle, there's the top of it, there's the trunk. And then we add on this to get the, so it's like you took a little triangular block. I feel like all the training I did as a kid playing with blocks pays off when I'm doing these things. I'm taking this and lowering it down until I have a car. Figure out where the wheel well is. Use X's. Just like, even if I do this and my math is wrong, it still helps you feel like that's a surface that somebody can stand on. Just kind of guesstimate this until you have something that looks like a wheel, and it helps you get the middle of the wheel in the right spot. And then you do the circle, and then you give just a little bit of mass. Over. I like to give this. This is how they used to do Disney cars, where they almost look like a face. And I still do it, though you only see that on maybe Rolls Royces or something now. But people don't usually notice that my cars look like they're 50 years old. 50, maybe more. 55. So cars used to be a lot more boxy. You do this, figure out how the doors look, do some of the, put pinstripes on it. This helps a lot. Just like the seam on the jeans helps the leg, helps that look more dimensional. Putting a nice thin double line down the car is a really common attribute of cars. And it makes it look more 3D, works really well there. So how do you do a modern car? Well, modern cars just like this, except all of the cool stuff, all the stuff that makes it look like a brick has been ironed out. So it's like this, but then you just kind of smooth it out. So I still draw the brick using that as my structure, and then I'll turn it into, if I want it to look like a Honda or something, I'll do this, and it looks like a wad of bubble gum, and that's really what modern cars look like, but it does look more like a modern car than what we've just drawn. The thing that really saves these and makes me feel like, I hate drawing things where I don't really feel like I have a much, it doesn't feel like there's something to hold on to when I'm drawing. Everything's soft, it just bugs me. These lines really save the day. There's the line of the hood. And then you got to do this and go through this and make these lines not touch, which is a nice challenge. There's the roof. I'm going to nudge that wheel over a little bit more. So I use the box to construct it, and then I just ironed out all of the lines. I really can't get it here otherwise. I just kind of start in the middle. Well, actually, I take that back. I think at this point, I can kind of do a blob and turn it into a car. But that's how I learned how to do it, was by doing it as a box first. Blob, wheel, front of the wheel, side of the car, back of the wheel. I'll make this a Honda. There's the windows, touch the corners. And then these lines here, I mean, look at a car at the factory and you'll find that it does have these lines, and it really helps map it out. There's the pinstripe again. And then you got to go in here and try to get it into that space without it getting squashed. Like so. This, over, up, over. I might not have enough room there. I'll fix that later. and then it goes down over the door. And maybe if I have a thinner pen, I can kind of get one more line in here.
Hey, Josh,
Yeah.
one of the challenges I have like drawing kind of modern looking vehicles is like where it used to be that like chrome, like the headlights and stuff got plonked onto one like planar surface.
Yeah.
Now things kind of wrap around, and I just like always get mixed up with the shapes that like kind of wrap around different surfaces.
Yeah, it's another thing where if you're going to do it as a corner, it would be like bump, bump, which is awkward to draw. Really, the corner of this one is right there. And it's just like you said, you just get used to making it kind of like an insect's eyes that spill from the front all the way over to the side. There's also often like several lights. Right?
Yeah.
Like you have I don't know, your night lights or whatever you call them.
Mm-hmm.
What do they call those? Your highlights. And your brake
Oh, your
light.
high beams.
High beams, thank you. High beams, pod racer, all your driving terms. Yeah, so that's kind of a modern looking front. I'll still do this. This is pretty plausible. I just love that little grate thing. It's not really on cars anymore, but I still like to do it. Or if I'm like trying to be a little bit more contemporary, I just do that, maybe shove the license in there, but usually the license is down here. You can also do a double line for the bumper. The more detail, the more little of those little kind of weird details I add, the better it looks. That looks like a car that could drive around now. It's funny, a lot of times when I'm sketching, I like them better than what turns out on my pages, which is maybe why when I did this, I was expecting those background people would just fall into place when I just kind of drew them really slapdash. But for some reason, the magic isn't always on there. But it's also because I'm drawing really big. I mean, this car would be the center of the image. This one, yeah, what's going to be small in a comics panel might be the size of a postage stamp, and that can sometimes throw me off. All right, cool. We are at the end. I got to prep for my other thing. Please send me any work you did in class I didn't get a chance to review. And let's see.
Any homework?
The homework would be to redo a frame using today's system and doing the hatching combined with the dashes. Try to do thin dashes and thick hatch lines, and try to do thin dashes and thick hatch lines and see what the difference is. So just like today, if you can do a whole page that way, or you can just redo some stuff from another image. And then Golda, if you need a whole new assignment to keep things like really going, just email me. I can give you like a more full narrative assignment. But I think like Adam's in my other class, so he has his hands full. And Andrew, your schedule hasn't really permitted you to do homework. Just let me know if you need more homework, Golda.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. I'll see you next
Bye.
week.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks, Josh.
My pleasure. Bye.